"You need to go, Dad. I can't do this anymore." That's what she said. Calm, sharp, final. My name's James Porter, 72 years old, from Denver, Colorado. That voice belonged to my daughter, Rebecca, the same girl who used to climb onto my shoulders just to watch fireworks from our old backyard. The same girl who once told me I was her hero. Now, she stood in her living room doorway with her arms crossed, her jaw tight, and a suitcase already packed at her feet. I looked at it, my suitcase, and said quietly, "You packed my things?" "I did," she said. "You've been here for 6 months, Dad. It's not working. You need your own space." I tried to keep my voice steady. "This is the house your mother and I bought, before you were even born." She rolled her eyes. "Yes, and now it's mine. I bought you time here while you got settled. But it's time for you to move on." Her tone was clipped, businesslike. I'd heard her use that same tone when she talked to her colleagues on speakerphone. Polite, dismissive, cold. I took a breath. "I thought I was already settled. You said—" "I know what I said," she cut in. "But things change. I can't take care of you and run my life at the same time." The words landed harder than she meant them to, or maybe exactly as she meant. I felt my chest tighten. "Take care of me. Rebecca, I cook, I clean, I fix your gutters, It's not about chores," she snapped. "It's about space. You linger. You make things heavy around here. I feel like I can't breathe in my own home." For a second, I just stood there, staring at her. There was a time when I would have raised my voice, but age teaches you restraint. Instead, I just said, "If that's how you feel." She folded her arms tighter. "It is." Then, as if she couldn't bear to look at me any longer, she turned toward the table and grabbed something. An old yellowed envelope. She tossed it onto my suitcase like it was trash. "You gave me this years ago," she said. "I don't even know why you kept it. Here, take it back." I froze. I hadn't seen that envelope in decades. I recognized the small handwriting on the corner, my late wife's handwriting, Ellen's. Rebecca didn't know what it really was. She never opened it. I told her once it was something to read later. She must have thought it was meaningless. I picked it up slowly. The paper was soft with age. I could still see the faint ink marks through the fold, the kind of writing Ellen used when she was hiding her emotions in tidy letters. "Where will I go?" I asked quietly. Rebecca sighed, impatient. "There's a senior complex just outside the city. They take people your age. I can pay the deposit for the first month." "That's not necessary." "Please don't make this harder than it has to be," she said, brushing her hair back. "I've got people coming over tonight. I need you gone by then." The house felt colder suddenly, not because of the air, because of how empty the walls sounded when she said it. I nodded once, slowly. "You're right," I said softly. "You shouldn't have to feel trapped in your own home." For a second, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Hesitation, maybe, or guilt. But she pushed it down fast. "Thank you for understanding." I picked up the suitcase. My hands were steady, though my heart wasn't. At the door, I turned once more and looked at her. "Rebecca," I said, "before I go, do you even want to know what was in that envelope?" She crossed her arms tighter. "No, Dad, I really don't." I smiled faintly. "That's all right. Maybe one day you will." Then I stepped outside. The door closed behind me, not slammed, just closed. The kind of quiet ending that hurts more than shouting ever could. The wind was cold, sharp. I walked to the truck placed the envelope on the passenger seat beside me, and started the engine. As I pulled away, I glanced once in the rearview mirror. She was still standing at the window, watching me go. I wondered if she'd realize, too late, that the envelope she threw back held the very thing her mother left for her: her inheritance, her apology, her truth. But for now, I said nothing. Because sometimes silence holds more power than words ever can. The sound of that door closing stayed with me all night. Not the slam, there hadn't been one, but the soft click, the quiet finality of it. I'd spent my life walking out of open doors, but this was the first time one closed behind me for good. I drove until the city lights faded in my mirrors. The streets blurred into dark stretches of highway, lined with the kind of quiet that makes you realize how small you've become in someone else's story. I stopped at a gas station outside Aurora. The neon sign flickered like it was tired too. I sat there for a while, watching my reflection in the windshield. 72 years, and I still didn't look ready for endings. The envelope sat on the seat beside me. I picked it up and turned it in my hands. The paper had gone soft at the corners, like it had been waiting too long to be opened. Ellen had written Rebecca's name in those careful looping letters she used when she wanted her words to feel gentle. I remembered the day she wrote it. She'd been sitting at the kitchen table, her head wrapped in that pale blue scarf she wore after the chemo started. The morning light had caught her face, and for a second, I'd seen the woman I married 35 years earlier. Steady, kind, unbreakable. "She'll need this one day," Ellen had said, sliding the envelope toward me. "Not now, not soon, but one day." "What's inside?" I asked. She smiled. "Just the truth." Now, decades later, her truth was sitting in my hands, and our daughter had tossed it back at me like a bill she didn't remember. Signing. I pressed my thumb against the seal but didn't open it. Not yet. The words inside weren't mine to read first. Instead, I drove back toward Denver until I found a parking lot near an old diner that stayed open all night. I ordered black coffee and sat by the window, watching the rain begin to fall. The waitress, a woman about my daughter's age, asked if I wanted anything to eat. "Just the coffee, thanks." "You sure?" she asked. "Cold night." I nodded. I've had enough for one day. When she left, I took the envelope back out. The rain tapped against the glass, a slow rhythm that made every memory louder. I thought about Rebecca's first apartment, how proud she'd been, how she'd hugged me when I helped her move in. She'd cried when I handed her a housewarming card with a check inside. "I'll pay you back someday," she'd said. I told her she already had. So what changed? When did love become weight? By the time the diner lights dimmed for closing, my coffee had gone cold. I stepped outside, the envelope tucked safely inside my jacket, and sat in the truck. The night was quiet again, the kind of quiet that makes you face yourself. I whispered, "You were right, Ellen. She's lost, and maybe I let her be." The rain slowed, soft against the roof. I closed my eyes and saw her handwriting again, bright and fragile in my mind. One day, I promised myself, she'll open this. And when she does, she'll understand everything I never said. I started the engine. The headlights cut through the dark, and the house we built together faded further behind me, just like her voice had. The road stretched ahead, empty but familiar. I didn't know where I was going, but somehow that felt like the first honest thing in a long time. The rain followed me most of the way out of Denver, turning the sky into a gray sheet that never quite ended. I drove until the highway signs stopped meaning anything, until the ache in my chest dulled just enough to let me breathe again. By midnight, I found a roadside motel just past Castle Rock. The kind with faded paint, buzzing lights, and a manager who looked like she'd seen every kind of sorrow walk through her lobby. She leaned on the counter, squinting at me through thick glasses. "Long drive?" "Long life," I said. She smiled softly. "Those are harder to check out from." Her name tag read, Linda. She handed me a key and nodded toward the far corner room. "Number 9. Heat works if you kick it twice. Coffee's free, but don't expect it to taste like much." I thanked her and carried my bag down the walkway. The air smelled like wet pavement and cheap detergent. Inside, the room was small but clean. 2 lamps, 1 bed, 1 mirror that hadn't been cleaned in weeks. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked around. It wasn't home, but it didn't argue with me. The old envelope was still in my coat pocket. I set it on the nightstand beside the lamp, where it looked older somehow, fragile against the yellow light. I thought about how easily Rebecca had tossed it aside, how casually she'd erased the weight of years inside it. I took a deep breath and opened my bag. A couple of shirts, a razor, a photograph of Ellen and me on our wedding day. That was all I had left that mattered. Linda knocked softly a few minutes later. "Brought you something hot," she said, handing me a styrofoam cup of tea. "You look like you needed something that didn't come from a gas station." "Thank you," I said. "You didn't have to." "Neither did whoever packed your bags," she said quietly. Then she gave a half smile. "But here we are." I didn't respond, but I think she saw the look on my face. She nodded once, kind and slow. "My daughter hasn't called me in 3 years, so I get it. Some people run out of words before they run out of love." When she left, I sat there staring at the steam curling from the tea. It smelled faintly of chamomile, Ellen's favorite. I could almost hear her voice in the small room, soft and certain. "You can't hold her too tight, James. Even love needs room to breathe." I took a sip and let the quiet settle. Then finally, I picked up the envelope. The paper crackled like dry leaves as I ran my fingers over it. Ellen's handwriting was still steady. For Rebecca, when she's ready to remember. I turned it over and slid my thumb beneath the flap. For a second, I stopped myself. It didn't feel right, opening something that wasn't mine. But then again, it wasn't hers anymore either. Inside was a single folded sheet, yellowed from time. I unfolded it carefully, half afraid the words would fall apart with the paper. It wasn't long, just a few lines written in Ellen's hand. "If she ever forgets who she came from, remind her gently. There's a part of us waiting for her in the house. The deed, the story, the promise. Don't tell her too soon. Let her earn the truth with time and kindness." My throat tightened. I folded the paper back up and placed it on the nightstand. That was Ellen, always believing people could find their way home, even through pride. I looked out the window. The rain had stopped. The streetlight flickered once, then steadied, casting a pale circle over the empty parking lot. I whispered, "You still see her better than I do, Ellen, even now." The room was quiet, except for the hum of the heater. I lay back on the bed, my hands resting on my chest, the letter beside me. It wasn't sleep that came, just a kind of stillness that pretends to be peace. I woke before sunrise. The air in the motel room was dry, the heater humming softly like an old friend trying to fill the silence. I sat up slow, rubbed the sleep from my eyes, and stared at the letter on the nightstand. The edges had curled a little overnight. It felt alive somehow, like Ellen's presence still clung to the ink. I picked it, up and read her words again, this time out loud, my voice low and rough. If she ever forgets who she came from, remind her gently. There's a part of us waiting for her in the house, the deed, the story, the promise. The words carried weight I hadn't felt in years. That letter wasn't just a mother's message. It was a key, and Rebecca had thrown it back without ever unlocking what was inside. I remembered how Ellen and I set up that trust years ago, back when we still believed the future could be shaped by love and paperwork. We'd written that the house would always belong to Rebecca, but only if she kept her heart open enough to care for family. We'd thought it was a gift, a safety net, something to protect her from the world. But now I realized it might have become the very thing that tested her instead. I set the letter down and opened my wallet. Inside was a photo of Rebecca as a little girl, no more than 5. She was sitting on my shoulders at the county fair, cotton candy in her hand, face sticky and bright. She'd laughed so loud that night, Ellen had said she could have lit up the whole sky. That memory hit me like a bruise I didn't know I still had. The clock said 7:15. I decided I couldn't just sit there waiting for another day to disappear. I folded the letter carefully, slipped it back into the envelope, and tucked it into my jacket pocket. Then I drove. The roads were quiet, the world half awake. I didn't know exactly where I was going until I saw the small brick office that used to belong to our family lawyer, Mr. Harlan, the same man who'd helped Ellen and me with the trust years ago. He looked older now, but when I walked in, he smiled like no time had passed. "James Porter," he said, standing to shake my hand. "It's been a while." "Too long," I said. "You still have the file on the Lawson property?" He frowned thoughtfully. "You mean the trust?" "Of course. Why? Something wrong?" I sat down across from him and placed the envelope on his desk. "Rebecca gave this back to me." He studied it, his expression tightening. "She gave it back? She doesn't know what's inside." "Did you tell her?" I shook my head. "No. I figured Ellen's words should speak for themselves when the time comes." He opened his drawer, pulling out a thick folder marked Porter Family Trust. The sound of paper rustling filled the room, soft but heavy. "James," he said, adjusting his glasses, "if she's asked you to leave, technically, she's broken one of the clauses." "I know," I said. "Then the property can revert to the foundation your wife named. You'd have every right to take it back." I looked out the window. The morning light was spilling through, golden and cold. "She doesn't need another lesson, Harold. She needs time." He sighed. "You always were too forgiving." "Maybe," I said quietly. But Ellen wanted me to remind her gently, not punish her. He leaned back, studying me for a moment, then nodded. "All right. What do you want me to do?" "Nothing," I said. "Just hold on to that file for now. And this." I handed him the envelope. "If something happens to me, deliver it to Rebecca personally, no sooner." He hesitated, then said, "You sure?" "I'm sure," I said. "Love's not a weapon, Harold. It's a mirror. She'll see herself in it eventually." I stood to leave. Outside, the wind had picked up again, carrying a bite that felt cleaner than it had the night before. As I reached the truck, I looked back once. The old brick office behind me, the past sealed inside it. Ellen's promise was still alive, waiting. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel angry anymore, just certain. When I got back to the motel, the day had already faded into that dull orange light that makes everything look like a memory. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the thin curtain, listening to the faint hum of cars on the highway. The meeting with Harold had stirred something I'd tried to bury. The old ache of responsibility, the kind that never leaves a father. He'd been right about one thing. I could take the house back. The law was on my side. Ellen's trust made it clear. If Rebecca pushed me out, the deed reverted to the charitable foundation we'd built in her mother's name. But the thought of doing that felt wrong. Like punishing her would be a betrayal of the love that built that house in the first place. I poured myself a cup of stale motel coffee and sat by the small window. A man can do a lot of thinking when there's no one left to listen to him. I remembered when Rebecca was 8. She'd gotten sick, pneumonia, and we spent 3 nights in the hospital. She'd clung to my hand so tight I could barely move. When she finally fell asleep, I whispered a promise in her ear. I'll never leave you, no matter how much you push me away. I'd kept that promise longer than she probably knew. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the folded papers Harold had given me, the amendment forms, blank except for the line where my signature should go. All I had to do was sign, and the house would be gone from her life. She'd learn what she'd done the hard way. She'd lose everything she'd mistaken for independence. My pen hovered over the line for a long time. The ink didn't move. Instead, I flipped the page over and wrote something else on the back. A letter. It started simply, Rebecca, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I wrote slowly, choosing each word like it mattered. I told her the truth, that the house she lived in was always meant to be hers, but that her mother and I had added that clause not to test her, but to remind her that family was worth more than walls. I told her I forgave her before she even knew what she'd done wrong. When I finished, I sealed the letter in a plain white envelope and handed it to Harold the next morning. For her, I said, when the time's right. He looked at me over his glasses. You're sure you don't want her to know sooner? I'm sure, I said. Some lessons take silence to be heard. He nodded and slipped it into his safe. You're a good man, James. I smiled faintly. Just a tired one. By the time I left the office, the sky had turned pale blue, the kind of day that almost forgives you just for surviving it. Back in the truck, I rested my hands on the steering wheel and stared at the road ahead. I didn't know what would happen next. Maybe she'd never find out. Maybe she'd live her life thinking she'd push me away for good. But Ellen's letter, my silence, and that envelope waiting in Harold's safe, they'd speak for me when I no longer could. I whispered to myself, you were right, Ellen. Love doesn't need to win to matter. Then I turned the key, and the engine started with a soft, familiar growl. It was 3 days later when the phone rang. I was sitting in the motel's small breakfast room, staring at a plate of eggs gone cold, when the sound cut through the quiet. It startled me. I'd almost forgotten what it felt like for someone to call. I checked the screen. Rebecca. For a moment, I didn't move. My first instinct was to let it ring out. But the truth is, no father ever really stops hoping. So, I answered. Hello? Her voice came through sharp, rushed, like someone who'd been holding their breath too long. Dad, what did you do? Do? I repeated, calm. With the house, she snapped. Some guy from the title office called, said something about an ownership review, about the trust being under reconsideration. What's going on? I took a slow breath. It's just procedure, I said quietly. Nothing to worry about. Nothing to worry about? She echoed, incredulous. Dad, they said your name was back on the record. You can't... Rebecca, I interrupted, my tone still steady. You don't need to fix this. She went silent for a few seconds, then said bitterly, You're doing this to punish me, aren't you? Because I told you to leave? I closed my eyes. No, I'm doing nothing at all. You're lying, she said, her voice cracking. You always said you'd never use money to control me. I guess that was a lie too. That one cut deep. Not because she meant it, but because she believed it. Rebecca, I said softly, you think power comes from what we hold over people. But real power comes from what we choose not to use. She exhaled sharply, frustrated. Stop talking in riddles, Dad. Just tell me, are you taking the house? No, I said. I gave that house away the moment your mother died. What does that even mean? It means you already have everything you think I could take. There was another pause, longer this time. I could hear the faint sound of her breathing, unsteady. I don't understand you, she whispered finally. I know, I said, but one day you will. And then, before she could respond, I added, There's a letter waiting for you. Not from me, from your mother. When you're ready, it'll find you. Her voice cracked again, this time quieter. Why are you talking like that? Because I'm done fighting for something that's already yours. The line went quiet. I thought she'd hang up. But instead, after a few seconds, she said, I didn't mean to hurt you. I know, I said. That's why I'm still here. The silence between us softened, turned human again. But then her pride kicked back in. The same armor that had driven her words the night she threw me out. I have to go, she said quickly. I'll figure this out. All right, I said. Take care of yourself, Rebecca. Goodbye, Dad. When the call ended, I sat there for a long time, staring at the half-empty cup of coffee. The rain outside had stopped, leaving streaks on the motel window like faint fingerprints. She was scared, not of losing the house, but of what it meant if I didn't fight her for it. Pride has a strange way of protecting us from guilt. I reached for my wallet, took out the old photo of Ellen again, and set it beside the phone. You always said she'd have your temper, I murmured. But she got my silence too. Outside, the clouds started to break, thin streaks of light cutting through. I watched them move across the wet parking lot and felt something shift inside me. A small, quiet peace that didn't depend on being right. Rebecca would come to understand someday. Maybe not soon. Maybe not while I was around, but she would. Because love like this doesn't disappear. It just waits. It was a little over a month later when I heard from Harold again. His voice came through the phone calm but careful, the kind of tone a man uses when he's about to deliver news he can't quite label as good or bad. She called me, he said. I knew who he meant before he said her name. Rebecca? Yes. She asked to meet. Said she wanted to get things straightened out. I told her I'd stop by her place tomorrow morning. Thought you should know. I looked out the motel window. The parking lot was empty except for my old truck sitting under a broken light. She must have gotten the official notice, I said quietly. She did. And James? Harold hesitated. You sure you don't want to be there when she reads the letter? I thought about it for a moment, then shook my head, though he couldn't see me. No. This part isn't about me. It's about her and Ellen. All right, he said. But if she asks, I'll tell her the truth. That you left everything to her, with no conditions. That's fine, I said. She'll need to hear it from someone who isn't me. When I hung up, the quiet felt heavier than usual. there's a strange kind of ache in doing the right thing. It doesn't give you comfort. It gives you clarity. The next morning, I drove back toward Denver. I didn't plan to stop at the house, just wanted to be close enough to know when it happened. The streets looked the same as when I'd left, though somehow smaller. Time has a way of shrinking the places you outgrow. I parked across from the house, behind a line of trees. From there, I could see the porch. The same one where she'd once taken her first steps, where Ellen had sat with a blanket over her knees that last autumn. Then I saw Harold's car pull into the driveway. Rebecca came out to meet him, her hair tied back, shoulders stiff. She looked tired, not in the way people do after a long day, but in the way they do after carrying guilt that refuses to go quiet. Harold handed her an envelope. I knew which one. She frowned, confused, then tore it open. From across the street, I couldn't hear the words, but I knew them by heart. Ellen's writing first, then mine. Rebecca's hands began to shake. She sat down on the steps like the ground had pulled her there. Harold stayed silent, watching her read. When she finished, she pressed the letter to her chest and covered her face. Her shoulders trembled, small and sharp. Even from a distance, I could tell she was crying. Harold placed a hand on her shoulder, said something soft, then walked back to his car. He paused halfway down the driveway and glanced across the street. He saw me sitting there, gave a slow nod, the kind men give when there's nothing left to say. When he drove off, I stayed. Rebecca was still on the porch, the letter in her lap, the same spot where she'd once handed me that old envelope like it meant nothing. She looked up once, scanning the street as if she could sense me nearby. Her eyes lingered on the trees for a moment, and then she whispered something. I couldn't hear it, but I saw her mouth form the word, Dad. I didn't move. After a few minutes, she stood and went back inside. The porch light flicked on as the door closed behind her. I sat there until the sun started to set. The air had gone still, the way it does before evening rain. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel angry or sad or even relieved. Just still. Ellen's words had reached her in a way mine never could. And maybe that was the way it was always meant to be. As I started the truck, I looked at the house one last time. The light in the front window glowed soft and steady. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was a beginning. That night, I parked by the lake just outside Denver, the same one where I used to take Rebecca when she was little. She loved skipping stones across the surface, counting each bounce like it meant something sacred. I hadn't been back there in years. The air was cool, quiet, the kind of quiet that feels earned. The city lights shimmered in the distance, faint and far, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel lost, just finished. I sat there for a while, thinking about everything that had happened. The shouting, the silence, the letter, the look on her face when the truth finally found her. I imagined her sitting on that porch now, holding Ellen's words in her hands, realizing how much love she'd thrown away and how quietly it had waited for her return. I smiled, though it hurt. You always knew how to reach her, Ellen, I whispered, even from the other side of time. The water moved softly, like it was breathing. I leaned back in the seat, my hands folded, and let the stillness carry me. I'd done everything a father could do, and then some. But a strange question had begun to rise inside me, one that wouldn't leave me alone. Because love, for all its beauty, can be cruel in how it lingers. I thought of Rebecca's voice on the phone, trembling with guilt. I thought of the way she looked at the letter. Broken, yes, but maybe beginning to heal. I'd forgiven her 100 times before she even asked. But forgiveness doesn't always mean you can go back. So I'm telling this now. To you, whoever's listening. I gave my daughter everything. My time, my work, my patience, my silence. I gave her a home built from my hands and a legacy written by her mother's love. And when she told me to leave, I did. I didn't raise my voice, didn't curse her name. I just walked away. You've heard the rest. You know what I still feel for her. So tell me, what should I do now? Should I go back and see if there's something left to rebuild? Should I forgive her quietly, keep my distance, and let time do its work? Or should I finally close that door and let her live with the truth she uncovered too late? Because no matter how many times she's turned me away, I still love her.